Eric Hendrickson here. Week of March 13th, crazy developments in the banking world. I'm sure most of you have seen it. What exactly happened? The Silicon Valley Bank that not many people outside of the venture capital community had heard of basically went down. The government had to step in. Well, unlike the Great Recession where banks got in trouble by making poor decisions on loans that didn't get paid back on their loans, this has nothing to do with lending. This has to do with more fundamentals of banking. And what a lot of people don't realize is that banks have to keep a kind of a reserve percentage of capital, so 10% roughly of their overall lending portfolio they need to keep in reserve capital. Well, you don't keep that just in cash. What they do is put them in highly rated bonds, typically US Treasury bonds. And a lot of banks, when they were flush with cash from COVID, with all the deposits that were coming in, they didn't know what to do with all this money, so they just put them in US Treasury bonds. And because the Federal Reserve, for a long time, if you remember going back a year or so ago, they talked about inflation being transitory and that we were going to continue to be in a low interest rate environment. So these banks thinking, well, we got a lot of time here, let's find some investments that have a higher yield, and they went a little bit longer, buying 10 and 30-year Treasury bonds, thinking, well, we still can sell those off if we need to get at that liquidity. Unfortunately, the Fed made a huge about-face a year ago, and you saw interest rates spike basically overnight, 200 basis points. And that really eliminated banks from the ability to kind of slowly sell off the bonds in their portfolio to get at that money. So no big deal as long as you don't need to get at that money. You can let the bonds mature and get your money back. But if you have a run on your deposits, so now people are pulling the deposits out of the bank, and you got to get at capital to basically backstop that, you go to your investment portfolio, and unfortunately there was massive losses there, and if they were to sell all of that, it would basically crater the bank. So an extreme example, but really at all levels, every bank does have an investment portfolio, and it is mostly US Treasury bonds. So every bank kind of is facing, on a larger or smaller scale, the same dilemma. How do we retain our deposits? How do we avoid having to tap into our investment portfolio to sell bonds at a loss? So that's where the US government basically said, hey, everybody calm down. We're going to insure all deposits, even over the FDIC limit. And banks, if you need to get at liquidity, don't sell your bonds early. We'll give you a lending facility that gives you 100% of par value, even if those Treasury bonds are underwater currently. So great moves by the federal government, in my opinion, just to calm banking down. But ultimately, banks are going to be more conservative coming out of this because they are understanding that deposits are precious, and for the first time ever, we're actually competing against the U.S. government as a bank for deposits because, hey, am I going to keep my deposits on the bank at 2%, or can I buy a 6-month T-bill at 5%, right? So, the government's kind of created a little bit of this dilemma with the rapid increase in rates. So, again, I think the moves by the government over the past 48 hours have been really good. But banks are going to be more conservative with lending, retaining, basically that deposit liquidity. That will bring down economic activity. That should, and you've already seen it today where long-term bond yields are down, mortgage rates are down. Because if banks aren't lending, it's hard to say the economy is going to be doing great and the economy is going to continue to grow. So I think banking is going to accomplish what the Federal Reserve hasn't been able to do with their rate increases as of late. Just slow down activity, make things more conservative. So I guess the silver lining is definitely charting a lower path for mortgage rates right now going forward. How low? Time will tell. We got the CPI report coming out later this week too. That'll impact things. But crazy days in the mortgage world, and we'll continue to keep you posted.